particularly where we are in rural Appalachia, that a lot of people have never, they've never had to deal with anything like this, and whether it's the land, the amount of people we encounter to this day that can't read is astonishing. Really? So they can't even read an application. So that's why our service coordinators, it's so important that we walk beside people.
And your service coordinators, these are the people that kind of know the language, the lingo of the different kind of assistance programs that are out there that are available to help people in these situations.
Yes, and what's interesting, when I started here in 2011, we had 14 staff members. Mm-hmm. Now we have 15 housing programs. we have more housing programs than we did staff members when I started.
Wow.
And the important thing to remember, and kind of what makes us unique, is that we have those 15 housing programs. We actually only have one shelter program. Mm-hmm. So we're no longer the little shelter on King Street. We're an agency that crosses 25 to 2,600 square miles. And we have tailor-made programs for housing programs. And it's not that our service coordinators know everything. They know how to navigate the system. The important thing about our service coordinators is we meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. So whether that's a lady that came in, she needed 4 months to save up her money. We worked to find her housing, and she was in and out of here. It's the lady that we've been working with that finally got her disability. She's now eligible to move into our permanent supportive housing program, and she's someone that will need us to be beside her for the rest of her life. Mm. So we have varying degrees of our programs where we get money from different avenues, whether that's family housing, whether that's domestic violence. We have 2 domestic violence programs, a family program, transitional housing program, permanent supportive housing program, and scattered site housing. And those are people living with a disabling condition that some of them will eventually move on. Some of them,
that's fine.
And some of them will stay with us until they enter hospice care.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a mix of people who come through once, more or less. They're pretty resilient people. They're going to go on and be fine. But then you're saying also you have a percentage that comes in, and you're going to get to know these people quite well, essentially through the rest of their life.
Well, and looking at, so if someone enters permanent supportive housing, they're no longer homeless. Mm-hmm. They're housed. And so still that ratio of the average person is only homeless once in their life. Mm-hmm. And we want that to be true.
Okay. So I guess kind of what you're getting at through the explanation of going back to the 80s and looking at the different societal factors that have led to increased homelessness. Essentially, the organization has had to respond to that over the years and decades.
Correct.
And so what does that increase look like? And I guess when you're looking at the issue today, and we'll get to Hurricane Helene a little bit later on, but what is the scope of the problem as it exists right now in the 7-county region?
A couple of different things. So back in I believe it was 2010, is when HUD started the Housing First model. Mm-hmm. And they said, we think this might work. We're going to first try it with veterans.
Okay.
Astronomical decreases in veteran homelessness. There are states and cities in this country that no longer have any homeless veterans because Housing First works. And what Housing First means is you get people housed, you surround them with their supportive services they need, you get them what they need, they're going to be more stable. The old way used to be, you have to be perfect. You can't be on drugs. You have to have a good credit score. Imagine that. I have to have a good credit score being homeless to get a place.
I don't have a good credit
score. And so you have to be completely sober. You have to be this. You have to be on your medication. You have to be a perfect human. So it was a stair step. Mm. You would enter here. If you're a good boy or girl, you can make it up to here. And then if you're up to here, we can probably find you housing. When we shifted from that as an agency, our numbers of people housed skyrocketed. This past year, is the best year ever. We moved 247 people out of homelessness in 1 year.
Just in the past year, like
Just 2024.
2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
Using that model. 30% of those were children.
Okay.
So that kind of tells you a huge chunk of those were also, I don't know the exact percentage, were also over 55. So moving and adapting with the different models and knowing what works and having the data to back it up is what's, it we know it works, but being able to show the numbers that, hey, look, this is working.
Okay. Yeah, the child aspect of that whole thing really kind of shocks me, but as I think about it a little bit more, I don't think it's ultimately surprising because I used to work at the paper over in Avery County. Spam called her, interrupting our interview. When I used to work over in Avery County, one of the first articles I did with them was about the children's home, which is now part of Leeds McRae College. But when I went over there and talked with them, they kind of gave me the history of the foster care system in the state, and it reiterates a lot of what you're saying. Where used to, you could be, I guess, orphaned or whatnot, and you would be able to go into a house like that where you had, people taking care of you. You were in there with other kids. It was kind of like I want to call it traditional setup that you usually see like in movies or whatnot from back in the day. But they said that eventually the state began to go away from that model and really centered on a foster care approach first model. And I think what you were saying is that there's more children in the system than there are foster care families available.
Per capita, the ratio is way off.
So because that gap exists, essentially organizations like Hospitality House are the ones that are kind of left.
We pick them up when they're 18.
Okay. When they're 18?
Yeah, when they age out of foster care.
Okay.
So, because if we ran our youth services program, but we do not have a youth services program where most of the children that we deal with are in families.
Okay.
So a lot of the kids are in our DV program with their parent.
Okay.
Domestic violence program, yeah.
Which I think like some states like California have expanded that range to, I think if you're like 20, 21, then maybe you can continue in the foster care system out there, but I guess obviously North Carolina it's 18
yes.
and then you kind of have to fend for yourself.
Right.
Okay.
But some states have expanded that, and I mean, I tell you stories. I got lots of stories. I've got we had a mom and her 15-year-old, and she was just like 35, died suddenly. Grandparents were like, well, we ain't taking him. And so for a temporary time, they were like, okay, you guys are the guardian. And we're like, okay. So we took care of him. And then we finally convinced the grandparents, like, you're the only living relative, and we really don't want him to go into the system.
Yeah.
We please. And it took us a while, but we looked out after him, made sure he got to school. And
but you essentially had to convince the grandparents to step up and take in the kids.
And then I've had many elderly folks where their kids were stealing their Social Security checks, and two different extremes. One, we were alerted, I want to say Yancey County, by law enforcement that an elderly lady was living in a shed with an extension cord going out and after going to the bathroom in a bucket. And her daughter was taking her Social Security checks. And then we had another lady, she stood up for herself and said, I'm not giving my checks to you anymore. So her daughter drove her and dropped her off in the parking lot. At least she gave her a ride.
Yeah.
So, and in my life, I never thought I would see an 84-year-old lady fleeing domestic violence. So, And the flip side of that, we have an 18-year-old that is now, he is in Washington State doing Job Corps. He's excelling so much so that he's doing culinary arts outside of Seattle. He's doing so well. I just heard from his mom that they're thinking of transferring him to the San Diego for advanced culinary arts to be a chef, like a upscale chef. So there's there's a ton of victories here, man. There's a ton of victories. You got to take those tough situations, and that's our job, is to walk people to their personal victory.